So today the topic is the facial nerve. So previously we've covered the oculomotor, trochlear, abducens, and hypoglossal. So all of them belong to the somatomotor column. So today the nerve is the facial nerve. So this is the seventh cranial nerve. And this has got a lot of clinical importance because any of your craniofacial surgeries, if it's done, and also trauma. So usually they involve the facial nerve. And facial nerve has a long intraosseous course. So whatever nerves till now we have studied about oculomotor, trochlear, abducens, hypoglossal. So they just come out of the brainstem and then they leave the cranial cavity through fissure or a foramen. Whereas this particular facial nerve, so this will be traveling within the bone. So there is an intraosseous course. So which bone? It is a temporal bone. So I hope you remember that we've got a temporal bone. So normal laterally you must have seen the temporal bone. So inside, that's why your your ear is there. Okay, so the temporal bone. So it passes through it. So it has a long intraosseous course. So whenever something is like, it's got a less space inside the canal, intraosseous canal within the bone. So obviously there are more chances of this facial nerve being affected during its course. So the knowledge of the anatomy is very much important because this is related to, because most of the surgeries are done on the face. So whether you're as a neurosurgeon, if you're working at the brainstem, so there again when you're working for ear surgeries, in the middle ear or below the ear or here near your parotid. So if you remember the parotid class, so the facial nerve was going through the parotid. So again, a parotid surgery is also done frequently. So any of these, so there is a long course and it's a complex course. And it's got quite a number of branches which are very different in their function. That is why if there's a lesion of the facial nerve, there's a constellation of symptoms depending upon the site of the lesion. Like, if it is the abducens or something, it's just a muscle paralysis, a weakness of the eyeball. But here you get a multitude of signs and symptoms. Like if the nerve branches which are innervating your facial muscles are lost, then obviously your facial expressions are affected. And not only that, the facial muscles are important for closing the orifices. So orbicularis oculi, if it gets involved, it gets involved in the facial nerve palsy. So difficult to close the eye. Okay, and the same thing even while chewing also, it becomes difficult. So that's because of the involvement of your facial muscles. So that I'll tell you in the later part. So that's one thing, the facial muscles are involved. The next thing is your head region is having quite a number of glands. So some of the important ones are, you've got the lacrimal gland which has to produce the tears, and then you've got salivary glands, of which the three major glands are parotid, submandibular, and sublingual. So leave the parotid aside. So we're left with submandibular, sublingual. And then we've got so many mucus glands. So we've got mucous membrane, we've got the nose, we've got the palate, and we've got the oral cavity. It's not dry. Okay, so there are mucus secretions. So this secretory part is all again coming from the facial nerve. So depending on the site of lesion of the facial nerve, so even the tear production may be affected, saliva production may be affected. Okay, so that's one thing about the facial nerve. And the other thing, if you remember, when I was talking about the development of the tongue. So there is one more sensation from the tongue other than the general sensation, that is the special sense, which is the taste. So the facial nerve through a branch called the chorda tympani picks up the taste sensation from the anterior two-third, excluding the circumvallate papilla. So again, it's picking up taste sensation. So there will also be a loss in the taste, an altered taste or loss in the taste sensation. So that's one thing. So you can see quite a number of varied way of the symptoms and signs that are presented depending upon the site of lesion. Okay, so that's about the facial nerve. So let's get into it. So it's a seventh cranial nerve, and if you see the picture of the brainstem, you can make out here. So this is the pons, this is the medulla, this is the pyramid, and this is the olive, and here starts the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, so you can see this is a pons, this is the medulla, so this is the pontomedullary junction. And here you've got the sixth one, so between pyramid and this. And here you can see the seventh is having two roots here. So these two belong to the facial nerve. And then just beside it, what you're having is the eighth cranial nerve. Eighth cranial nerve is the vestibulocochlear nerve, and it is involved in your hearing and balance. So here, the seventh cranial nerve emerges from the pontomedullary junction. So which part of the medulla? It is the olive. So pons and olive. Then there are two roots. So the large one is the motor root, and this one, which is slender comparatively, so that is called as a nervus intermedius. Okay, so the nervus intermedius, because it is intermediate in position between the main motor, brachiomotor nerve, and vestibulocochlear. So that is why it is called as a nervus intermedius. But actually, functionally, this is related to this facial nerve. So this is the nerve of the second branchial arch. So again, branchial arches, the first arch, second, third, fourth arches. So this is the second arch nerve. Then has four modalities, like, see, because it's innervating to the face, we can say face, then tongue, taste. So here we can add even saliva and mucus also. So I told you all the glands in your face. And then the ear. So there's a very small component of the facial nerve picks up sensation from this part. This is called the concha. Okay, so external auditory meatus. So that small region is where the sensation is picked up. So it's a very insignificant branch, but this was actually discovered something around early 90s, 1907 or something. If you remember, I mean, some of the tables, like when I've told about dorsal root ganglion of the spinal nerve, I mentioned about herpes zoster. So when you get chickenpox, that particular virus, it hides in the dorsal root ganglion. Okay, so it hides there, and when you grow up much older and there's an immunodeficient condition, then it gets reactivated. So that particular nerve, the sensory innervation, so that dermatome to which that particular nerve innervates, so there you will find small, vesicular lesions, tiny, fluid-filled lesions will be there. So there will be restricted only to that dermatome region. So that's how, once in a facial nerve palsy, the Ramsay Honey has identified there were small vesicular lesions in the concha region. So that's how they came to know there was a small area in the auricle, I mean external ear, that was innervated by the facial nerve. Okay, so that's about this. So for this tears, you can add the rest of the secretions, that is the saliva and the mucus too. So this already I've sent you the nuclear organization. So there are 3 motor columns, and then there are 4 sensory columns. So here, so the 3 motor columns here, this represents the somatomotor. So 3, 4, 6, 12. I'm not finding the facial. Then this is the branchiomotor, or the special visual efferent, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11C. This is nucleus ambiguus, and here I find 7. Then what is the name of this nucleus? This is the branchiomotor nucleus of facial. Okay, so this is one nucleus related to it. Then the third column is a secretomotor and a visceromotor. So here 3, 7, 9, and 10, and you've got nuclei named here. So again, I find 7 here. So the other nucleus, what is the name? Lacrimatory and superior salivatory. So this is again a nucleus. So 2 motor nuclei. One is a branchiomotor nucleus of facial. The other is a secretomotor, or this is a parasympathetic nucleus of this lacrimatory and superior salivatory nuclei. Then this part here, this is a sensory. So these 4 columns are the sensory columns. So the first one here, general visceral afferent, I don't find here 7. Then this part is for the taste, special visceral afferent, and here I find 7 again here. Somatic afferent, all the sensations of your face, the touch, pain, pressure, everything, temperature, everything is picked up by the facial trigeminal. Okay. Then this one, special somatic afferent, that is hearing, the vestibulocochlear nerve. So the sensory nuclei, these are called nuclei of termination. That is, this facial nerve comes and terminates here. Whatever information is bringing about the taste, it comes and innervates. It just leaves the information there. So that's what you're seeing. So basing on this, the functional components. And here I told you that the entire face region is from the by the trigeminal. All the information has to go to your trigeminal nucleus. But I told you a small part in your face, that is near your ear, is again picked up by facial. So ultimately, where should that facial information go? It has to go to this column, to the trigeminal nucleus, that is the spinal nucleus. So in the next diagram, you will see. So here it is the motor nuclei and sensory nucleus. So nuclei of origin, branchiomotor nucleus, and there is a secretomotor nucleus, which is lacrimatory and superior salivatory, from where the facial nerve motor fibers arise. Then here the nuclei to which the facial nerve, whatever information is coming, is dumped is 2 places. One is the nucleus tractus solitarius, which the taste comes here, and the other, whatever I told you, the small area of the ear. So that comes here towards the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal. So general, somatic, afferent. So now basing on this, you can tell what are the 4 functional components. So this you can say branchial efferent, or the branchiomotor, general visceral efferent, then special visceral afferent, and then here. So this is going where? Efferent is motor to the glands of your face. This is going to the muscles of your face. And this is picking up taste. And this is picking up small sensory information from your external ear. So branchiomotor or the branchial efferent. So these will supply the muscles of the second branchial arch. So let's look into this. So the second arch related to this face. So here, the developing the neural tube here, this part is the medulla oblongata. From there you can see, these are the pharyngeal apparatus. So pharyngeal arches 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And you can see, this is the facial nerve innervating the second. So whatever mesoderm, mesenchyme and neural crest here will be forming your facial muscles. They're all innervated by the facial nerve. So all these facial muscles expressions here. So you've got a scalp muscle, frontalis and occipital frontalis for your scalp. Then you've got so many muscles here around orbicularis oculi. Then you've got around your nose. So then you've got around your mouth. So all of them. Then here also you've got some auricularis superioris and then posterior. And then in the middle ear, there's one more muscle that is a stapedius. So if you remember the middle ear class, they must have told you about the stapedius muscle. So that will balance this movement of the stapes. So if there is loud sound, it will not allow much movement of that. So there's a stapedius muscle. That's about this part. And then a little bit when it comes down here, related to this part, so you've got a stylohyoid. So you've got a styloid process here. You've got the hyoid. There's a muscle here that's called stylohyoid. The other muscle is posterior belly of digastric. So you've got a digastric extending from your mandible going up to the mastoid. Okay. So anterior belly of digastric and posterior belly of digastric. Anterior comes from the first arch, and then posterior comes from the second arch. So what are the muscles derived from the second arch? The scalp, that is occipitofrontalis. In the face, all the muscles of expression. Then you've got the stapedius inside the middle ear. Then here in the neck region, you've got the stylohyoid and the posterior belly of digastric. Okay, and then your auricular region muscles. So all of them are coming from here. So all of them receive innervation from the facial nerve. So here that's, and this is the parotid. So these are all the muscles. So the parotid class, so from this anteromedial border, from which the pes answering is the 5 branches. So it's like the temporal branch, then you've got the zygomatic branch, then you get the buccal branch, then here it will be the, so this temporal, when it's going here, supplies this frontalis part. Okay. And this one zygomatic here, orbicularis oculi part here. And the buccal goes to your cheek region. Then marginal mandibular will be going towards this part here, the chin and the lower lip region. Then you've got one more, that will be the cervical branch to your platysma. So that's a shaving muscle. Okay, so it's also called as a shaving muscle. So all these branches supplying to all these muscles. So in this we can identify the parotid gland. So that's about your branchiomotor fibers within the facial nerve. What are the other fibers we talked of? It is a parasympathetic fiber. So the secretomotor fibers. So secretomotor fibers are supplying all these glands. I told you 2 salivary glands, 2 major salivary glands of the submandibular and sublingual. And the other one is the lacrimal gland, which is important for the production of the tears. And the other is the mucous glands of mouth and nose. So this is a dissection here showing the lacrimal gland. So it's got an orbital part and it's got a palpebral part. And this is a levator palpebral superioris. Okay. So this is the lacrimal gland. So the lacrimal gland, when it gets stimulated, what does it produce? It produces the tears. So the tears are of 3 different types. One is a basal. So even when I'm talking to you, there are tears being produced. So these are to maintain, to avoid the dry surface of your cornea. So they'll be just, always watering your eye. That's important. That's called a basal secretion. Then, and for the tears to spread, we need the blinking. That's why if you're watching the television or your mobile or your system, you feel the dryness in your eye, because when you're watching for a long time, closely these gadgets, what happens, you forget to blink, because of which there will not be a proper movement of the tears across your eyeball, leading to the dryness. So dry eyes, we suggest them to blink more. Of course, we give some tear drops too. So that's a basal. Then reflex, if something falls into your eye, then there should be reflex secretion of the tears to wash that particle away. That's called a reflex tears. In psychic tears, some deep emotional reason may cause the tears. That's called psychic. So we have the production. This is the importance of the tears. So if there's a lesion of the facial nerve, so depending upon the site, then there will also be a decrease in the tear production. So when there's a decrease in the tear production, especially the basal part and the reflex, then what happens? So the dryness of your eyeballs, that will affect your cornea. So your cornea is very important for your vision. So patients with facial nerve palsy, in whom there is difficulty in closing the eye, because orbicularis oculi, which is your facial muscle, is important for you to close your eye. If you're gently closing it, it's the palpebral part. When you tightly close your eyes, you shut your eyes, like when you're watching a horror movie, you're scared of it. So that requires both the orbital and the palpebral part. So when you're shutting them very tight, that is your orbicularis oculi. So for closing the eyes, you need orbicularis oculi. So if the facial nerve is paralyzed, so what can happen? They will not be blinking and difficulty to close the eye also. So obviously the eye is exposed to the external environment, leading to more dryness, and the cornea will have a corneal ulcer. And corneal ulcer, when it heals, becomes a scar, and that will definitely affect the vision. Because when you want vision, so cornea, the light passes through. So if you've got a glass, you can, a crystal clear glass, you can see through it. But what if it's like, it's like repeatedly it's damaged and it becomes very thick looking, that more opaque. Obviously, you cannot see through the glass. So the person loses vision. So one of the most important things you have to take care is, when you see a facial nerve palsy case, you have to remember to protect the eye. So usually we give an eye bandage to close the eye, okay, to prevent the dryness. So this is about the lacrimal gland innervation. Then your submandibular and sublingual glands. So these are all the major salivary glands, and this is submandibular, and we've got a sublingual gland. So stimulation of which will produce saliva. And then mucous glands of nose and palate. So this is nose and palate are completed. So they're having mucous glands. So they also need an innervation. So the parasympathetic preganglionic fibers come from the lacrimatory nucleus, go up to the lacrimal gland, and then and also to these mucous glands. And from the superior salivatory nucleus, whatever fibers come, so these will be going up to the submandibular and sublingual glands. So these are parasympathetic fibers. So that's why if you have heard of the fertilizer poisoning, so the farmers, they take the fertilizer and they poison themselves. So that's usually an OP poisoning, wherein there's increased parasympathetic stimulation. So because of which, when the patient comes, it's like you can find a lot of tears and saliva drooling down. So it's like hyperactivity of the parasympathetic, because there'll be a neuromuscular blockade. So I'm just telling you all this to remember that you're crying, that saliva, everything, the fibers are being carried by the facial nerve, the parasympathetic. So that's about the two. One is a branchiomotor and the other is a secretomotor. Then coming to the special visceral afferent. So that's a taste sensation. I think that's easy here. So you have the parts, and the general is by the lingual, which is the trigeminal branch, facial, chorda tympani branch. So the lingual is supplying the general sensation. It's a branch of the trigeminal. So here, this is a trigeminal nerve here, so mandibular division, and this is the lingual nerve going towards the tongue for picking up the general sensation. So you can see this tiny fiber here, chorda tympani. So this chorda tympani of facial nerve, so actually this, it just comes and joins it. So when you're dissecting this infratemporal region, you will find it's easy to find lingual nerve, and just look at the posterior border of it. When you see some nerve coming and joining it, that should be the chorda tympani nerve. So the fibers, when they pick up the general sensation, they travel along with it, okay, and then they leave this chorda tympani, and then that will go up to the facial nerve. So the facial, so whatever nerves which pick up the sensory sensations, they're called as the sensory fibers, and these are usually the pseudo-unipolar nerves, first order. Sensory is first order, second and third order. So the cell bodies are located outside the central nervous system. So the sensation which is picked, so this will be, you can see the green color, it's picking up the sensation, that is the chorda tympani. The fibers are going along with the lingual. The dotted ones is the lingual. You can see the lingual. So they travel together, but then these fibers are separate. They look like they're going together as one nerve, but actually there are different nerve fibers inside. So this chorda tympani and You find the cell body here, pseudounipolar neuron cell body. This is peripheral process. This is a central process. So all the taste information has to go to which nucleus? The nucleus tractus solitarius. So sensory information from there should go, which is the next level, that is the thalamus. So it goes up to the thalamus, the VPM nucleus, and from thalamus to your sensory cortex, that's the gustatory area where the processing of the taste information is there. Okay, so that till there it has to go. So first order cell body is here in the geniculate ganglion. So geniculate ganglion is a collection of cell bodies. So geniculate ganglion, you find it on the facial nerve. Just like you find the dorsal root ganglion on the dorsal root of spinal nerve, same way there will be a bulge on the facial nerve. And that's exactly where the facial nerve bends. So it's a genome, bend is a genome. At that location you find a bulge. So we call it as a geniculate ganglion. So that's about the taste, the entire course of it. Then the small region, the concha. So I hope you understood that. Next, coming to deep attachment. So the nucleus, which I just showed you what are the names of nuclei and what fibers are going through and where do they go. The motor fibers and the sensatory fibers from where they pick up. Let's see the deep attachment part. So this is the section of a pons. So pons here, this is the abducens nucleus, that is the sixth cranial nerve nucleus, and these are the fibers of it. And this is the facial nerve nucleus. Okay, this is the facial nerve. So facial nerve fibers, instead of coming right away like this, these want to go and meet the abducent nerve. So they said hi to it, and then they return back this way. Okay, so here they bend. It's a bend. So this is one characteristic feature of the facial nerve. So though facial nerve nucleus is more ventral compared to that of the abducent nucleus, but still the nerve fibers go back, they go wind around the abducent nucleus, and again they traverse through the section of the pons, and then they leave at the pontum and very junction between the olive and the pons. So because of this, an elevation is produced when you look. So this part is what? Behind it is the fourth ventricle, where the CSF is there. So when you look, this is the floor of the fourth ventricle. So here when you see, you will find an elevation that is a facial colliculus. Facial colliculus is because of both this abducent nucleus bound by the facial nerve fibers. And you can see this is a genome again, a bend. This is called an internal genome. So previously I told you geniculate ganglion, I told you facial nerve again bends. That's outside the CNS. That's an external genome. This is an internal genome. So within the section of pons, you are finding this. So all this you can just go through it. And here an important relation is, if you find the patient is having the hemiplegia, then the facial nerve is involved and also the abducens is involved. Then definitely the lesion is the level of the pons. Because you can see in the pons, so the fibers here, the corticonuclear fibers are located here because this is the part. Pontine nuclei will be here. So this part, the corticospinal, corticobulbar fibers go like this in the ventral part of this pons, and then they go up to the pyramids, that is the medulla oblongata. So these fibers, then abducens and facial, all are together. So if there are three combination, then you have to know that this lesion is at the level of the pons. Some ischemic structure, some tumor compressing that part. Then coming to the nuclei, so I've drawn a picture. So all the faces, if you can identify, because these are all facial nerve related nuclei. So here, branchiomotor nucleus of facial. You can see the fibers, the winding around, producing a facial colliculus. This is the fourth ventricle, and the fibers go out. And then this part here, the above eyes are representing the lacrimatory part, and below the superior salivatory part. You've got another one that should be the inferior salivatory related with the glossopharyngeal. But here, so I'm just drawing through, that is the lacrimatory, superior salivatory. These will be giving the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers. So that's why this is again a motor neuron, comes like this. And I've drawn this circle here to represent the ganglion. So you've got 4 peripheral parasympathetic ganglia. So the one is the pterygopalatine and the other is the submandibular ganglia. Then I've drawn here 2 pseudounipolar neurons to represent the sensory fibers. So the pink is the bringing the taste, chorda tympani. And the other one is bringing up the sensation from your ear. So this is peripheral process, the central process. So where should this one go? It has to enter and go into your nucleus tractus solitarius. So this tongue here, also it is tasty. So 7, 9 and 10. So the fibers in the 7th region, it comes and gives the information. Then I told you the sensation should go up to the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal. So this part here traverses the spinal nucleus of trigeminal. So the trigeminal has a very lengthy sensory nucleus. Okay, so these are the 4 and the fibers. So motor fibers pass from the main motor nucleus, and here this is how they go. The nucleus of origin, parasympathetic fibers, the same. Superior salivatory, they go, whatever, you can just read this. So lacrimatory, to understand this here, see. This is the column, the secretomotor column here. So secretomotor here, this is superior salivatory. And then this is lacrimatory nucleus, inferior part. So this is that related to the facial. So the same I've represented facial. This is the branchiomotor nucleus of facial nerve. This is upper part is the lacrimatory nucleus. This is the superior salivatory nucleus. And see the fibers. So these are large cell bodies. Okay, large motor neurons here. These are comparatively smaller, the preganglionic ones. So you can see the way they are going. So the first picture I've shown you, there are 2 roots of the facial nerve. So one is a large motor one, the other one is a slender nervous intermedius. So whatever fibers are coming from the branchiomotor, I put them together. That means these will constitute the motor root. So motor root is exclusively motor, so carrying the branchiomotor information. Then this one here, the superior lacrimatory and superior salivatory, you can see the fibers going this way. So this entire thing is a facial nerve. Okay, so 2 roots when they come out. So you can see it's going into the nervous intermedius part. The nucleus of termination to tractus solitarius and spinal tract. Again here, nucleus tractus solitarius in pink, the spinal nucleus of trigeminal. So that's about the various nuclei. And let's look at this, the intracerebral course. The section of points you have to draw, and you can just show the relations. So here all the lemnisci are there, the medial lemniscus, spinal lemniscus, trapezoid body, then corticonuclear fibers are going here. So the relations. Then coming to central connections. So I have shown you 2 motor nuclei. One is a branchiomotor nucleus and the other is a secretomotor nucleus, which is both lacrimatory and superior salivatory. So coming to the branchiomotor nucleus. So motor, so it has to get some information from your higher center. So what is your higher center? It is a cerebral cortex. So cerebral cortex will be controlling this branchiomotor nucleus. So when you want to change an expression, when you're talking, when you're eating, voluntary act, whatever you want to do. So that is all under the control of your cerebral cortex. So what you want to do, the brain understands and sends that particular muscle now contract this. So you want to make faces, okay, then it'll tell, okay, these muscles contract. So that information is coming from your cerebral cortex. Then sometimes there'll be spontaneous facial movements, especially these are more pronounced in certain extrapyramidal lesions, because the pyramidal system is always monitored by your extrapyramidal system. So that's some spontaneous facial movements, sometimes like facial tics and all, which is normal, it may happen, but if they're exaggerated, they're part of your extrapyramidal diseases where the basal ganglia and all are involved. So that spontaneous is because of your extrapyramidal system connections. So this nucleus is not only your cerebral cortex, to the other extrapyramidal like the basal ganglia, amygdala, it's connected. Then sometimes you want to be normal, but then some emotional reasons your facial expressions do change without even your voluntary thought. So they are called, that is all hypothalamic inputs, and these related to your limbic system, your emotions, also cause a change in your expression. So that's all hypothalamic, it's not under your control. So they will modulate the emotional response. So these are some basic thought, like what is the central connection means. So what all will be controlling this particular nucleus. So mainly it is a cerebral cortex and also extrapyramidal system, it has connection, and also the hypothalamic inputs. Then this is the most important thing which you should understand. I'll just read out first. So this one is a facial nucleus here. Firstly, this is a section of the pons. So this is a section of the pons. So this one is representing the facial nucleus. This is the abducens nucleus, and the facial nerve fibers are going here. So this was previously what I've shown. So facial nucleus is group of facial neurons. So there are so many neurons here. And these neurons will be giving rise to, this is a cell body of the neuron, and these will give the axons, which will, these are the lower motor neurons, okay? So these will go to your particular facial muscles. Then this is controlled by the fibers coming, upper motor neurons coming from your cerebral cortex. So these will be the upper motor neurons. Now, these facial neurons, the lower motor neurons in the nucleus, they are like in two parts. The upper part, whatever muscles are there in upper part, they are in the upper part of the nucleus. And these neurons of the lower part of the nucleus innervate the lower part of the face. Okay, so your own face, imagine into two. Okay, so two facial nuclei, again half above, upper half and lower half. So the neurons innervate muscles in the scalp and upper face receive bilateral corticobulbar fibers. So now this is one side. You can see the nerve fiber coming down like this. So this is innervating this upper part of the face. Then it's also going to the other side to innervate the other side upper part also. Again here this side, see this is the right side. It's innervating the upper part just the above the horizontal line. Then it's also going up to this. Okay. So this one is innervating this upper part region. And also again here, it's going to this. At the same time, the lower part this side, it's also innervating the lower part here. And this side, the same, it's coming here, upper part. It's also going to the other side. That's also going to the upper part of the face area. Then it's giving another one for the lower part. So now you can see the upper parts of both sides, both facial nuclei are receiving what? Bilateral corticobulbar fibers. See, two are there, both red and green in the upper part, here also red and green. So this received upper face, muscles, neurons which innervate the muscles in the scalp and upper face receive bilateral corticobulbar fibers. Then the lower part is representing the neurons of, so the lower part is relating to the neurons of the lower half of the face. So neurons supplying the lower facial musculature only receive contralateral innervation. So this side it should be green, but you can see lower part it's innervated by red. And here you can see it's actually the red side, but it's coming to green. So this is one thing you should remember. You can just practice, you'll understand this. So the same here. And previously I talked about the branchiomotor, we're continuing that. So branchiomotor, I told you the cerebral cortex, which I have shown just now, and the rest were extrapyramidal system and the hypothalamus. So what is the other nucleus you've got? You've got the parasympathetic secretomotor nucleus. So parasympathetic, obviously involuntary, it is autonomic system, and it should get inputs from where? From your hypothalamus. Because hypothalamus, limbic system, and the reticular formation is the higher center for your autonomic system control. Then the ascending sensory inputs from trigeminal gustatory nuclei, whatever the information they're reaching the trigeminal and gustatory. Obviously, from there the fibers, like trigeminal thalamic tracts, and then solitariothalamic tract. They will ultimately go to the VPM nucleus of ventroposteromedial nucleus of thalamus. From there, they'll be projected as thalamic radiations to the sensory cortex. So that's about the nuclei, and then coming to superficial attachment, the same two roots, and here you can see. So this is actually a thick one. Beside it is the nervus intermedius, and this is the vestibulocochlear nerve. So this is pons, this is medulla, and here you will have the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So this black one they have just put to show you prominently. They've colored the nerves. So this is called a CP angle. So this is cerebellum here. This is middle cerebellar peduncle, and here you will have the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So this is a region called a CP angle, cerebellopontine angle. So usually if there's a lesion here, usually acoustic neuroma is a condition which affects the vestibulocochlear nerve. So when that mass, so tumor is an increase in the number of unwanted cells, okay? So they are useless, but they just trouble the others. So that can compress the cerebellum, then you have the facial nerve, and so when there's a combination of symptoms wherein you have is verticorrelated with your vestibulocochlear imbalance because of your cerebellum and also your facial nerve palsy. Then where should we suspect the lesion is? In the brainstem at the CP angle. So even surgery is done here also should be careful because the facial nerve is so close here. So usually we'll be operating on this acoustic neuroma, then this is very close to it. Again here, two nerves, two roots, motor and sensory, intermediate nerve. Motor is exclusively motor, having only the branchiomotor fibers, whereas the other one, that is a nervous intermediate, is carrying the rest of the two sensory fibers, both your taste and your somatosensory from the ear, as well as parasympathetic motor fibers. So all the other fibers are present in nervous intermediates. So the main one is exclusively to the second arch mesoderm derived muscles, and the nervous intermediates is carrying gustatory fibers, somatosensory fibers, and parasympathetic fibers. So the same here. See, motor is carrying only the branchiomotor fibers, whereas the nervous intermediate is carrying both parasympathetic, then gustatory, going to nucleus, and then somatosensory fibers going to the spinal nucleus of trigeminal. Coming to the course. So once it exits from the brainstem, so it will be an intracranial course. So normally, previously we talked about the oculomotor, trochlear. So they have an intracranial course, then they have an intracavernous sinus. So they go along the lateral walls and then they exit through superiorbital fissure. So same way, this is also having an intracranial and extracranial. So intracranial is still the point of exit from the cranial cavity. So one is the posterior cranial fossa will travel, then internal acoustic meatus. If you remember the osteology part, the petrous part of temporal bone is called a meatus. Then this is a facial canal found in the temporal bone. Then this is the exit point, the stylomastoid foramen, and the parotid gland. So the parotid and then into the face. So this is, so once it exits from the stylomastoid foramen, begins the extracranial part. So it goes into this, it's exposed here, then goes into the parotid, then also onto your face. So I didn't try the face part yet. So course through posterior cranial fossa. So I told you once the nerves, they just come out from the brainstem. So there's pia mater, and the next one you'll be going to subarachnoid space. So subarachnoid space is where you have the blood vessels and the CSF. So this blood vessels, so this blood supply of CNS will be taught in the next class. So these are the two vertebral arteries which form the basilar artery, and this will divide into posterior cerebral arteries. So this basilar artery gives rise to pontine arteries. This is pons. All of you can identify the pons here. So these are all pontine branches. Then this is the cerebellum. So here you get the anterior inferior cerebellar artery. So from your vertebral arteries you get posterior inferior cerebellar arteries. Okay, it's not shown here. So these are anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and these are all pontine arteries. So one of these arteries is large, called as a labyrinthine artery, and this along with these three nerves will enter into the temporal bone. So internal acoustic meatus, what enter it, please today draw a diagram and read that. So internal acoustic meatus of your petrous bone. So here the 7 and 8, because in the petrous part of bone you've got your internal ear, so obviously your vestibulocochlear has to go there. Then facial also traverses it, goes related to your middle ear cavity and exits down. So facial also go, and also labyrinthine artery here, this also goes. Okay. So now here again the important point is, you can see anterior inferior cerebellar artery here. So if there is an aneurysm of this region or some abnormal coursing of this artery, which may loop here or something, so that can also lead to a facial nerve palsy. So then coming to the temporal bone. So this is an overall view. So this is this is a section of the pons. You can see all the facial nerve coming. This is the petrous part. So this is your posterior cranial fossa. We are in the middle here. So from here, this is the petrous part of temporal bone. It enters. Then all this intraosseous course. Okay, then it's exiting out, stylomastoid foramen, and then extratemporal course. So here, the posterior cranial fossa, you can see this is petrous part of temporal bone, where you have internal acoustic meatus, and this is the point where your facial, the two roots of facial. So when they're entering, it is as two roots. Then beside it is a vestibulocochlear, and going over it will be the labyrinthine artery. All of them are going together. So this is the individual petrous temporal bone. So from this brainstem, so this here pons, it just comes out and goes into this. And this is a petrous part of bone. they have broken this roof here. Okay, so these are the nerve fibers, the two roots. This will become the vestibulocochlear, and here two roots have become one. Okay, facial nerve. The green one is the facial. See, it's coming internal acoustic meatus and going back into the bone from along the medial wall of tympanic cavity and behind on the posterior wall of tympanic cavity, and then exits down. Again, here you can make out. So after it, there's a small length of internal acoustic meatus. After that, whatever bony canal is there, that is called as a facial canal. So just when it's entering the facial canal, it just bends here. So this is external genome. And at this bend, you find an elevation, a bulge, that is a geniculate ganglion, where I told you the cell bodies are there. So it's coursing on the medial side of your middle ear. Then it goes behind and runs down along the posterior wall of the middle ear cavity. And then it exits. So this is a stylomastoid foramen. So you have your mastoid process here and a styloid process here. So between them, there's a foramen, stylomastoid. So it exits down. So here quickly, I'll just show you the branches. So from the geniculate ganglion, you can see one is the greater petrosal nerve. This is going to a pterygopalatine ganglion. So here, whatever fibers are going, so these will be, I told you, the parasympathetic goes up to your lacrimal gland and also your mucous glands of your nose, your palate, and your oral cavity. So all those parasympathetic fibers are going here. Motor has to traverse all the way because the final destination is your facial muscle. So branchiomotor from the branchiomotor nucleus goes up to your face. Whereas parasympathetic, this much earlier, they are given away from this entire big bundle of fibers. So from the geniculate ganglion region itself, some fibers come out, and these are the parasympathetic fibers which go towards your pterygopalatine ganglion. So this course later I'll teach you in the cranial parasympathetic ganglia because I don't want to confuse you now. So just remember the greater petrosal nerve is going, and this will go up to the pterygopalatine ganglion. So from here, the postganglionic fibers come and they go to your lacrimal gland as well as your other mucous glands of the face. Then the second branch, this is from the geniculate ganglion, greater petrosal nerve. So this will traverse through pterygoid canal and go here. Then coming to the facial canal here, you can see one nerve, that is a nerve to stapedius. So stapedius, again, the branchiomotor fiber has to go because it's coming from your second arch. Then here, this is the final, the chorda tympani. So the last, whatever remaining parasympathetic fibers coming from your superior salivatory, they leave like this. Okay, this is the chorda tympani. In the middle ear, they must have taught you about the tympanic membrane and its relation to the chorda tympani. So this chorda tympani traverses like this, and you can see lingual nerve. It goes with it. So in the previous diagram, I told you chorda tympani will go and join the lingual nerve and go reach up to the tongue. So the branches here. So this is the facial nerve. Okay, the geniculate ganglion, and this will enter into the facial canal. So from the ganglion, you can see the greater petrosal nerve coming like this. This is later joined by sympathetic fibers. Deep petrosal nerve becomes nerve of pterygoid canal and then goes to the pterygopalatine ganglion. So such a big course. So here, so initially two roots which enter the internal acoustic meatus. Then in the internal acoustic meatus, they become one nerve. Okay, fibers are many inside, but when you look, as it's a one bundle of nerve fibers. So in this geniculate ganglion is represented by the cell bodies of the sensory, as with the taste, as well as your the sensory part here. And you can see the stapedius branchiomotor fibers and here. So this is the terminal fibers, parasympathetic. After that, you can't make out any parasympathetic fibers. I mean, sorry, here it's not shown, but the fibers, the yellow ones, parasympathetic. So these two branches, greater petrosal nerve, nerve to stapedius, chorda tympani. I'm also showing you some green color here. So this is all sensory. So somatosensory fibers from your ear, they also travel through the greater petrosal. And also from your, this from the tongue, they're traveling along with the chorda tympani. So this is all extratemporal cords, so the parotid gland and the fibers, extracranial. So once they come out, so once this exits out, here it gives a posterior auricular branch which supplies to your occipital part of occipitalis frontalis. Then it will also supply to your stylohyoid muscle and posterior belly of digastric, and then it goes towards your parotid gland, and then it branches. All the branches, temporal, zygomatic. So this is your styloid process, and this is a mastoid process. So if you touch behind your ear, that tough one, which you're following, the bony part, is your mastoid process. So more deep, you've got your styloid process. So between them, this is a stylomastoid foramen. This is an image showing the fetal skull. So you can see the fetal skull. So beyond this part, the mastoid did not grow yet. So up to 2 years of age. So the facial nerve, as it is coming out, it is protected by this mastoid tip. And then it traverses this way and comes up to the parotid gland. So when you're performing a surgery in less than 2 years old children, you can see that there is no development of the mastoid in this fetal skull. So you should remember that the facial nerve will have a very superficial course. Okay. So when you're giving some incision behind the ear of a child, then you should be careful about the depth of incision, because you may go up to the facial nerve. So there are the branches which you can later see. Then communication. So I will not stress much on the communication. So whatever, when it's going, there are plexus around the arteries. There are other cranial nerves like vagus and glossopharyngeal. Then there are branches of trigeminal. See, when the muscular branches are going to your facial muscles. So also I told you there's one more deep sensation, that is the proprioceptive sensation. So the trigeminal, which picks up the sensations, all superficial, or the touch, pain, temperature, and all that. But proprioceptive is a deeper sensation which is present within the muscle fibers, between the muscle fibers. So that which is picked up by the facial, it tells, okay, anyways, we've come till here to supply us, please take up the proprioceptive information. So it picks up, and just see the facial nerve is supplying branches. You've got also trigeminal branches going. So there itself they communicate and they just give it away. Proprioceptive information is transferred to the trigeminal. So that's why it communicates with the branches of trigeminal. So these are all communications. The nephroid anatomy, you draw the diagram and then you will understand this. Okay, we'll have the discussion later in the group. So upper motor neuron will lead to contralateral lower half of face and LMN ipsilateral, because here, see, this is a lower motor neuron. So after they have come out, this is called infranuclear lesion. So all the fibers are going to this side of the face. So if any injury at this level, definitely this entire face, half of the face is paralyzed. But if there is this side, see, supranuclear lesion this level. So this will be, this part will escape the upper motor neuron part, and this is the contralateral side. So this is the left, but here you can see the right side is being affected. The contralateral lower half of the face. So what happens in these lesions, upper motor neuron or lower motor neurons? Because upper motor neuron lesion is escaping the upper half of the face, but lower motor neuron, the lower half. So easily you can distinguish. So what could be the features here? So let's just see the actions of the muscles. So here you've got a frontalis, and also that will help in forming the wrinkles on your forehead when you're expressing. Okay, so that's the thing, the wrinkling will be lost, so it will be flat. And then you've got your orbicularis oculi. So this orbicularis oculi, it contracts the eye can close. So obviously in the palsy, there will be difficulty in closure of the eye. Then there is loss of tone. When this paralysis, all the tone is lost. So it looks like to be more sagged. And when the angle is also drooping down. Okay, flat nasolabial fold will be there. Okay, this between your nose and this cheek, that will become more flattened. And here you've got buccinator muscle. So buccinator is one muscle which is important. It assists mastication. We don't say it's a muscle of mastication, but it is a assist in mastication, and it is supplied by the facial nerve because it is coming from the second arch mesoderm. So what's the action of the buccinator? So have you ever blown a balloon, or you must have not played a trumpet, obviously. So when you blow something, air, so the cheek gets puffed, there's air inside. So that air to push out, the buccinator has to contract, push the air out. So in the same way, when you're eating the food, okay, so there's a cheek pouch that is formed into which there is the food, but which is actually the grinding part. The food grinds between your molars. So in the cheek, there's no point of the food staying back in the cheek. So the buccinator pushes it towards your jaw for it to grind the food. So if the buccinator gets paralyzed because it is innervated by the facial nerve, so then what's going to happen? the patient, like he's unable to chew the food. Okay, so because it's like, you know, just stuck here. So he tries to push it with the tongue to the other side, normal side, and that side he uses it for chewing. So that's one thing. So the lesions here you can make out. And there's one condition called as Bell's palsy. So infranuclear lesion of facial nerve is the lower motor neuron palsy. And there's one condition called Bell's palsy. So the same thing here. And this occurs especially at its exit from the stylomastoid foramen. So you can see complete paralysis of facial muscles of the same side. So I told you all the muscles. This loss of wrinkles, loss of, you know, closing of the eye, flat nasolabial fluid. Then this angle droops. Then when it's drooping, what happens? Saliva dribbles, obviously, because salivary production, I mean, that's not effective if the lesion is at this level. And loss of corneal reflex. Because corneal reflex, what orbicularis oculi has to contract, and that will not be present. And especially this facial nerve palsy, when we ask the patient to close the eye, because she can't, but you can see the eyeball rolling up. That's called a Bell's phenomenon. So I'll just go through them. So, and when we ask the patient to smile, so normally when to show the teeth, so there should be an equally on both the sides. But which is on the normal side, it tries to, you know, more contract more and pulls this angle up. Whereas this side, he can't show the teeth completely. And then here, depending upon, say higher, so at this level though, only all the motor fibers are lost. A little bit higher level if they go, then here the stapedius is involved in hyperacusis. So even a little sound tends to be a very loud sound for that side here. So especially the patient, you know, when he's using a mobile, he tries to put it away from the ear, because even that normal sound, which is normal to the other person, may be more to that particular person. That's called hyperacusis. And if cauda tympani is involved, obviously the taste loss is there. So at this level, if it's lost. Then much higher above the geniculate ganglion. So from here you get the greater petrocellum, which is important for your lacrimal secretion. So now even the lacrimal secretion is also affected. So 3 levels. Lowermost, only this muscular part. Little bit higher, taste and also stapedius, hyperacusis. Much higher at the level of geniculate ganglion, because lacrimal fibers are also given away. So loss of lacrimal secretion. So that's about the facial nerve. So facial nerve first is, it's a complex course. So we have to draw the entire diagram from the brainstem up to the face. So it's passing within the CNS, that is through the pons, draw a section of pons. Then it's exiting out, traversing in the posterior cranial fossa. Then it's entering into the petrous part of the temporal bone through the internal acoustic meatus, then facial canal, then exits the stylomastoid foramen, then traverses a little bit here, and then goes into the parotid gland, then branches inside, and pes anserinus onto the face. So that's the entire course of the facial nerve. So 5 terminal branches of the facial nerve, and 4 important nuclei. 2 are nuclei of origin and 2 are nuclei of termination, sensory nuclei. Okay, so this is about the facial nerve.